Concurrent estates. Co-ownership is possible with property. There are three ways for more than one entity to share ownership: joint tenancy, the tenancy by the entirety, the tenancy in common. Let's discuss these a little further. One of the first concurrent estates is joint tenancy. Joint tenancy is the holding of an estate or property jointly by two or more parties. There are four guidelines necessary to form a joint tenancy, of which we will discuss in detail a little later. The right of survivorship is a unique trait of the joint tenancy ownership. It allows surviving joint tenants to automatically receive the interest of another owner if he or she dies. This feature can avoid a lot of wasted time and money associated with clearing the ambiguity of unassigned property rights. The right of survivorship must be evidently expressed, because clear expression of the right of survivorship, along with the other four guidelines, are required to form a joint tenancy. The individuals, who are called joint tenants, share equal ownership of the property and have equal undividable rights to keep or dispose of the property. A joint tenant can sell or transfer his or her share in the property during their lifetime. This concept is known as inter vivos. It is important to note that this sale or transfer of the property can occur without consent of the other party. However, because of the right of survivorship, the joint tenant's interest is neither divisible or descendable. As previously stated, there are four guidelines required to form a joint tenancy. 1. Joint tenants must make their interests at the same time. 2. By the same title, meaning in the same instrument or deed. 3. With identical equal shares. And 4. With identical rights to possess the whole. Again, a clear statement of the right of survivorship must accompany the four guidelines in order for a joint tenancy to be created. Joint tenancy can also be terminated. One way is by selling or transferring your interest. If joint tenancy is between two people, or one sells or transfers his or her interest, the tenancy is severed because one of the four guidelines have been violated. A tenancy in common now exists between the remaining two parties. If the joint tenancy is between more than two parties, the person receiving the interest from the previous tenants now has a tenancy in common relationship with the other joint tenants, while the initial joint tenants, or the remaining joint tenants, still have a joint tenancy relationship. Another way to dissolve the joint tenancy is by partition. A partition has three different identities: voluntary agreement, partition in kind, and forced sale. The tenancy by the entirety is another concurring estate. It is similar to the joint tenancy, but it's created strictly between married couples. This is a common law doctrine that is recognized in 21 states. This concurring estate happens automatically unless otherwise specified. It also enjoys special protection from creditors of only one spouse, and unlike joint tenancy, a unilateral conveyance by one tenant by the entirety of his or her share is ineffective. The next concurrent estate is tenancy in common. We alluded to this earlier. It also has three major components. Each co-tenant owns an individual part with the right to possess the whole. Also, each co-tenant interest is descendable, divisible, and transferable inter vivos. There are no survivorship rights among tenants in common. And the feature that I believe is most interesting and is the nicest is that the presumption favors the tenancy in common. So when in doubt, the court will construe in favor of the tenancy in common. The presumption disfavors joint tenancy because joint tenants, with the automatic right of survivorship, are able to avoid the system of probate. There are also rights and duties for co-tenants. And unless otherwise noted, the rules discussed will apply to all concurring estates previously. Each person has the right to enjoy possession of the whole as noted in the reading. This is a central concept of co-ownership. It doesn't matter how much a person contributed, each ownership has access to the whole. So for example, if one person contributes 9% and the other person contributes 91%, each has an equal access to the whole. If one of the owners decide to prohibit access to the other owner, that may be considered as ousting. And ousting is ejection from a freehold or otherwise possession that deprives one of their inheritance. In receiving rent from a third party, a co-tenant who leases all or part of the premises to a third party must account to his co-tenants, providing them their fair share of rental income. Here, the amount of interest in the party is relevant. Each owner would receive rental income as is equal to his or her undivided interest in the whole. So going back to my example, the person that has 9% will receive 9% portion of the rent. The other person carrying 91% interest would receive 91% interest of the rent. The next right of duty relates to adverse possession. It states that unless he has been ousted, the other, a co-tenant in exclusive possession, cannot acquire title to the whole to the exclusion of the other through adverse possession. The reason being is because adverse possession has certain required elements, and the element of hostility would be missing because the co-tenant is voluntarily out of possession. Each co-tenant is also responsible for his or her carrying costs, to include taxes, mortgage interest payments, and also their share in repair costs and damage to the property. Now, the segment that's a little bit more convoluted relates to improvements. During the life of the co-tenancy, the improver enjoys no affirmative rights to the contribution for his or her efforts. However, at partition, when it comes time to dissolve the co-tenancy, the improver gets a credit equal to any increase in value caused by her enterprise. So if Mary contributes a fixture to the property that now enhances the value by $10,000, she then in returns, upon the sale of that property, is entitled to her investment in that improvement. Lastly, as made known in the reading, a co-tenant must not commit waste. Waste is considered neglect. A co-tenant may bring an action for waste during the life of the co-tenancy. A co-tenant has the right to bring an action for partition. As the value of land and commercial and residential real estate increases, partnership in property is becoming common. The discussion on concurrent estate plays a major role in property law, as it is important to have laws to govern co-ownership. These rules help to avoid conflict and also bring solution to challenges as they may arise. Thank you for listening to my presentation.